Hello, everyone. Super excited to be here in Madrid tonight, together with wonderful Lubomila, who I really admire for all the work that she's doing in the space. And we're going to talk about linking plates and the planet today. Before we introduce ourselves, I would like to, get into the topic a little bit by figuring out how well you guys have prepared to join this session today. So who of you thinks that the carbon emissions, the global carbon emissions that are kind of created or influenced by our food system exceed 25% of the overall carbon emissions? Anyone believes it's more than 25%? The food related. You, yeah? Who thinks it's less? Yeah, okay, so we're a bit undecided. Actually, 34%, up to 34% of our global carbon emissions are caused by the food, by the drinks that we choose every day, that we eat every day. And our food is not only responsible for a huge amount of the carbon emission, it's also responsible for 70% of biodiversity loss on land. It also has a huge impact on our health. So it's a super important topic that we need to solve, and we are super excited to talk about this today. First of all, let's maybe start off with a quick introduction. Do you want to share with us how you got into the topic of sustainability? Tell us a bit more about your background. And then I'll be happy to do the same.
Amazing. Thank you so much for opening up the chat. So my background does not start anywhere related to sustainability. I used to be in investment banking, then I was in VC in Asia, and then I moved back to London to work in fintech. But in 2016, I found myself on a beach in Morocco, which was a serendipitous moment to figure out that I had no clue about pollution, I had no clue about climate change, and that kicked off a one-year journey where I just decided to read a lot of scientific papers, cried at a lot of documentaries, and then also link myself to people that were informed on what it really mattered. The outcome was quite devastating because it was quite clear that businesses had a big responsibility to play, scientists were giving the facts, governments were trying to figure out how to set up the regulation, but ultimately it was quite of a mess. Thank God that was in 2016, so things have changed significantly, but the exciting bit is that after this long journey, I still stand strong behind the mission and believe that we can fix it.
Perfect. A quick introduction from myself. So I founded my first startup, Suvu, back in 2006 in Vienna. It's meanwhile a global market leader for AI digital sales assistant, conversational sales technology. Startup has raised more than 200 million in venture capital. After 12 super exciting years, I decided to bring in a scale-up CEO, hand it over to him at the triple-digit growth rate, then left the business a little bit less than a year after. And I decided to take a year off with my family. So we bought an RV and we traveled through Northern Europe, Norway, Finland, Sweden. And that was obviously an amazing time from a personal perspective, but it was also a time where, very similar to what you just told us about, learned a lot about the climate crisis. We were standing in front of those glaciers, seeing how they are retreating year over year. And at that time, my second son was on his way. And I just figured out, okay, there's nothing more interesting, nothing more important for me than to really address those two biggest issues of our time, climate crisis, biodiversity crisis. I then got active investing into climate, into biodiversity, into pollution startups as a business angel through Triple Impact Ventures, which is my investment vehicle, which is run by a great investment manager, while I'm focusing on my second startup baby, which I decided to found at that time, which is Inoko. And happy to tell you a bit more about Inoko later. But before we dive into what our companies are doing and how we help food and beverage companies and grocery retailers to really make progress on their sustainability journey, can you tell us a bit more about what are the levers that really push companies towards taking action now? Is it just because they want to, be good citizen and have good PR, or what's behind it?
The beauty of the sustainability topic today in any industry actually is that there's a lot of dramatically intense forces that are pushing for the shift to happen. 3 years back, this was a totally different situation. But today you have a lot of regulatory changes. So the European Union in particular is pushing a lot of these reporting standards to be set out. Also a lot of decarbonization planning to be now explained, and then essentially if you don't achieve it, it will be penalized against your revenues. And then there's also, of course, the employees. I think on the food side, we know also as consumers that we have a big choice to make on daily basis. And finally, you have investors, which is what is quite exciting because these ESG labels are starting to build a lot of depth into the minds of investors because they're becoming a lot more tangible. They're not only just a number or a label, but they're an explanation whether the business is going to have longevity or not.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a bit more about CSRD? It's a huge topic that lots of corporates are affected by now. What's the impact of that?
So there's been more than 200 different legislations that the EU accepted last year, which essentially are pushing different types of businesses to change something about their sustainability agenda. CSRD is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which ultimately requires any company above 250 employees to report on their emissions and environmental impact. That, if we look at the scale of some of the food agri companies, is ultimately impacting 90% of those that are in the market. And essentially, it will push 75% of the European Union economy to prepare for the first time this kind of a format of a report. What this means is that it now is not anymore a choice to do sustainability. It's not a tick of the box, but it's really allowing yourself to digest your performance at the moment and then set out a plan on how you're going to improve.
Yeah, I think this is really key to understand for businesses out there, that large businesses really need to prove that they have a path towards carbon neutrality by 2050. And that's a law. And if you don't show progress on that, you're basically going to have to pay fines for that. And that's obviously a big trigger. But also from a consumer perspective, we obviously see a lot of consumers taking action. How do you see the current economic environment, inflation affecting that?
I mean, we spoke earlier with you, and also, of course, I know what your product is. One of the reasons why you get to offer your solution to businesses is because this transparency is expected from consumers. If I have to think of what is the triggering point, or kind of how do we think about the legislative standards starting to embed themselves, and then obviously this combined with the economic situation creating a lot of disbalance in businesses, then we end up in a situation where today businesses are having to think about sustainability. They're limited sometimes on budgets, so they're trying to find shortcuts, but they are not able to respond to them if they don't either use a solution like yours, or if they don't find an incredibly talented sustainability team that can take care of that, because all of these legislative standards, they require depth of knowledge that is not simply let me prepare a report based on some financial accounting KPIs that everyone has studied in a business school.
Let's maybe get a little bit more into practice. Let's talk about how grocery retailers, how the food and beverage industry can really measure the impact of their business and how they can reduce it. And I want to start by sharing some insights how that works from a grocery perspective. So what we do at Enoco, it's basically a software as a service platform that allows those grocery retailers to assess the impact of their thousands of food and beverage products at scale. So they have the possibility to really share with you as a consumer from dark green to dark red how sustainable is this product from a climate perspective? How is it doing from a animal welfare perspective, so that you as a consumer, or we all as consumers, can ultimately take more sustainable choices. So the way it works is basically we take the data all those retailers have today about their products, the ingredients, the order of the ingredients, the nutrient values. That allows us to understand, to basically figure out what's the recipe of the product, and then we can apply conservative emission factors onto these processes and ingredients involved, and really give you as a consumer, but also the business for reporting, good insights into what's the carbon footprint of a steak that you're purchasing? What's the carbon footprint of the famous avocado? What do you guys think? How bad are avocados really? Are they really? Who thinks they're extremely bad? Hands up.
I'll jump in here because this is my most hated question. I think climate action is really not about trying to quantify everything that you're doing bad. It's about identifying what really works for you so that you're part of this movement. When it comes to quantifying these things, and believe me, we have clients not only within the sector that we're discussing here, but also the BMWs of this world and the BNP Paribas of this world. And there you get to scientifically indigestible numbers because obviously the carbon footprint is quite shocking. It is a matter of identifying these actions that then will turn this either person or the entity itself into a vehicle of change as fast as possible. So if you like avocados, eat them, but then find another product that you're also going to be switching so that you feel that you're contributing. I've stopped eating meat now for 5 years and it's been okay. I have not been able to give up cheese. I do like eggs as well. I don't know how is it for you, but yeah, the famous avocado should be also in a bucket with a bunch of other famous things that we should not blame for climate change.
Absolutely agree, and that's also so the good news for you guys is avocados from a climate perspective, are not even nearly as bad as if you compare it to a steak or something like that. So keep continuing enjoying your avocados. Try to limit your consumption here because they have other impact like huge amount of water use, social impact. But overall the message is it's not about us all having to become vegan. Even I still eat meat. I mean, I try to reduce my meat consumption to maximum once a week. And when I eat meat, I only eat organic meat because also animal welfare is super important to me. And also from a climate perspective, that obviously makes a difference. So it's not about us all having to go vegan from one day to the other. We actually all can feed 10 billion on that planet by transitioning to a concept which is called planetary health diet. And the key essence of that is that we should try to eat, 50% of our plates should be full of vegetables, should be full of fruits. And if we do that and if you reduce our meat consumption, 10 billion people can be fed on the planet. So it's not just about, this thing is bad, that thing is bad, but it's really about overall getting more conscious, getting a better understanding, and trying to really, figure out how you can, move into the right direction, basically. But what do companies do within their own scopes, within scope 1 and scope 2, in the retail, on the grocery retail side, on the food producer side? How do they try to reduce the impact?
So maybe it's useful to explain what scope 1, 2, and 3. There's a scientific format methodology that is used internationally called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and it's divided in 3 layers. Scope 1, facilities and vehicles. Scope 2, electricity, heating, cooling. And then scope 3, suppliers, investments, logistics, employee, travel and commute, and a bunch of other elements. As you can assume, if you're talking about an automotive company, probably not all of these elements are associated to it. Maybe they don't have investments, maybe they don't have particularly, let's say they don't have offices, so they don't have facilities. There's other cases where if you take a food company, obviously they're heavily reliant on suppliers, maybe if they're a grocery store, and they're heavily reliant on logistics if they deliver and so on. So if you look at these 3 levels, I would say one of the biggest challenges that is still quite visible across the space is how do you get the data? Because obviously you can think of all of the people you need to call just to ask them, what's your electricity bill this month or this year, to essentially cover just your suppliers. We have clients that have 4,000 suppliers. That's a lot of phone calls you need to do, so not exactly the best. The second challenge that you have is really the discrepancy in education. We might be excited about sustainability. That's not the truth about, I would say, either the whole industry or the stakeholders, let alone within this industry. So a supplier that is based in the middle of Spain might be a lot more educated because here, obviously, there's a lot of concern for water consumption, for drought, for wildfires, and so on. someone that is in the middle of Poland might have a bit of a different perception. So bringing everyone to the same level of knowledge is also another important challenge to tackle as a business. And then the final element, I would say, is the narrative, and that's something that many people perceive as a qualitative element, but the truth is that if we don't explain as a business, and that I'm putting myself in the shoes of the companies that we're talking about here, like the grocery stores, the food producers, the whole process of them either decarbonizing or going on a sustainability journey, when you're selling something that goes in a supermarket and people go, look at the label, they see the score that you've given them, they're like, why am I signing up for this versus something else? Maybe you have some insights on why people do that, but my key kind of challenge that I've noticed is that many companies just fail to explain why sustainability matters and is embedded in their values.
Yeah, this is super important learning also that we made, that it's not just enough to tell you as a consumer this product, has a low footprint or a high footprint, but what you really want to know is what's in it for me as a consumer, what's in it for the planet, what's in it for animal, what's in it for other people if I choose that product, or if I replace a product that I'm wanting to buy by a more sustainable alternative recommendation. So it's not just about grading and rating products, but we call that impact insights, really using those digital means, in-store apps, to really get the message across. Why is this product having a rather positive or rather negative impact, as well as, for example, recommending more sustainable alternatives. I think we're already moving towards the end of our session, but I think, what from your perspective can we do as consumers to really have an impact in this area?
Sustainability is a very individual journey, and as consumers, we quite often purchase food. We quite often maybe buy travel, or maybe you buy clothes. I've reduced my consumption significantly. And we need to understand that the biggest power that we have as individual consumers is really our purchasing capacity. You go out with your credit or debit card, and every single day you stand for the values that are maybe connected to sustainability, maybe not yet. But if you still question some of the decisions that you make, you should make sure that you at least have the question mark in your mind, even if you want to buy this product that comes from a fast fashion company or from maybe an unsustainable food producer, that is okay. Just make sure that you overcompensate somewhere else. The only way we can assume that this reality is going to change, or we're going to feel comfortable with the next decade that is ahead of us, is really when we understand that we hold a lot of power as individuals that are going out and buying stuff, as individuals that work for companies, and as individuals that also have the possibility to vote. So consider yourself as a powerhouse that is maybe not utilizing all of its powers on a daily basis for the goodness of humanity. I truly believe in the positive outcome of this challenging battle that we have, but it's only because we all exist. Nothing else is actually going to be effective otherwise.
Indeed, I think it's the challenge and the opportunity of our lifetime. It's not just a challenge, it's not just a problem, it's an opportunity to really transition towards a healthier life, because the good news is a climate-friendly nutrition is very much aligned with a healthier nutrition. So it's not only good for the planet, it's also good for you to really look into your nutrition, try to reduce your meat consumption, try to reduce your consumption of animal-based products, enjoy more plant-based meals. And you as a consumer, you as an employee, and here you have huge power and influence, but also as a business, we all can do our part to really transition to this bright new world which we all want to live in the future. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.